Hey, this is Strangers and Aliens. I'm Ben Avery, and this is a special episode. I've got my Fago Rockin' Rye, and I'm going to explain to you why in just a moment, but I'm going to pour myself some right here. I am very excited to be pouring this for myself right now because this is what I call the Rockin' Rye ritual. And this is a special episode of Strangers and Aliens on YouTube, on the video feed, and that is because I'm going to be doing an unboxing of a book project that I've been working on for a long time, and I'm finally doing the Rockin' Rye ritual. We'll talk about it in a minute. We'll also talk about some other Christian anthologies that are out there that I want to talk about, maybe bring some awareness to you. And finally, we're going to talk a little bit about parables, and it's all tied into this one project that I've been working on, like I said, for an awful long time. And so, without any further ado, I'm Ben Avery. This is Strangers and Aliens. Welcome. Let's get started. Okay, so the other thing I have in my hands is this package from Amazon. That's because inside this package from Amazon is the proof copy of an anthology that I have been working on for a long time. I've mentioned it. You've seen some cover reveals. I've talked about it in some of my other videos. It's finally here. It's going to be released on November 17th, and it's already available for pre-order on Kindle. But on November 17th, you'll be able to purchase it in paperback as well. And if you want to know when it comes out, you'll get a reminder email on November 17th if you go to benavery.com/orbits. And so what I want to do is I want to unbox it. I want to compare it to the other anthology that I have. And then I want to talk about some other anthologies that I have read that I want to recommend that are Christian sci-fi anthologies. There aren't a lot out there that I'm aware of, and there are very few that I actually have in my possession. But I want to do some recommendations for you about some anthologies that you might be interested in, especially if you like what we've done with A Time for Everything and what we're planning to do with Parabolic Orbits. And then I want to read the introduction from Parabolic Orbits to just talk about really parables, what they do and why they do it, okay? And I'm going to botch some Greek because I do not know Greek very well, but I did get some help from Nathan James Norman as far as how to spell things for the page anyway. Let's get started. And the way I want to start is by taking this package and opening it up. And this is, you're going to do it with me right now. You're going to witness with me right now my first physical copy of this book. It's the proof copy from KDP, from Amazon, and here it is. Now, before we get to that, this is the previous book that we did, A Time for Everything. So you can see it's huge. This is a 500-page book because I wanted to do all of the times. Those 28 of them. I wanted to make sure they were all in one volume. I should have split it into 2 volumes. I really should have. And so for Parabolic Orbits, we actually split it up into 3. I should have split this into 2. I didn't, and so it's a 500-page book. All right, it is a massive tome. It's a brick, some might call it. This is not quite as big. It's only 300 pages. And here it is, Parabolic Orbits, with that wonderful strip across the face of the astronaut, but that wonderful cover by Jeff Slemons. And there it is. There's the back right there. And he told them many things in parables, saying, and then underneath it explains what we're getting into. These are the stories he told, retold, across space and time. In this collection, you will find a prisoner serving a life sentence on a doomed world, a mining colony on a planet with dangerous secrets, an immortal facing death for the first time, an unproven military squad in a high-stakes battle, a centuries-long reality show in Earth's orbit, and more. Jesus' parables use familiar elements to teach timeless truths. With these stories, you are invited to revisit his messages using the imaginative tropes of sci-fi. And I have already actually made some changes to the text there, but I'm also seeing right now that I might need to make some changes to the barcode box right there. Move that up a little bit because it almost cut off Amy's name on the bottom there, but that's why you do a proof. That's why you do a proof. Now, something else I've done recently is I redesigned A Time for Everything's cover. This is a little bit of an inside baseball. But this is the old cover right here with the title down toward the bottom. And then this is the spine right here, which does match kind of in some ways the Ghost of the Future spine. It's different size. And so I was like, I don't need it to match Ghosts of the Future. I need it to match the anthologies that I'm doing with Parabolic Orbits and the follow-ups to that. And there's the back cover. And so I actually did switch that up to make it more uniform with the new style that I designed myself. And yeah, so there is the new one right here. So you'll see that the new one matches Parabolic Orbits, and these are meant to look good on the shelf together. Let's see if I aligned it well. And it looks like, yeah, there you can kind of see right there that these strips on the back with the picture, on the spine rather, are supposed to line up. They line up here at the top mostly, and they line up here on the bottom mostly. It is not perfect, but it's gonna have to, that's gonna have to do, because that's just how they cut it. Actually, this right here along the middle, that's fairly close to perfect. And then the back, of course, they kind of match there as well. Although there's a much longer list of people right here. But it looks like that barcode box is bigger than they told me it was going to be. So I am definitely going to have to make some adjustments there, unless that's just because it's the proof copy and not the Amazon copy. So yeah, this there are 14 people in here. First, we have Pest Control by Carrie Neitz, Walk in the Light by Kathleen Bird, who also appears in A Time for Everything, The Debt by Denise Bruggers, Founder's Feast by Harding McFadden, Seeing Past the Future by Liz Deppner, The Nebra Sky Disc by Sarah France, The Siege of Hanthorpe by Brad Paquette, The Stars from Home by Elizabeth Staub Van Duysen. I really should have talked to people before I did this and find out how you actually say your names. Teddy Deppner has The Keeper's Voice. Amy Walsh has The Great Selection. Turning of the Day by Carol McDonnell. The Delivery by Sammy Booker. Wasted Talent by J.L. Burroughs. And Life's But a Walking Shadow by Ben Avery. And yeah, so that's this anthology here. And, you know, if you haven't seen the cover without the strip, it does look a lot better than this. But yeah, I'm excited about this. I'm very excited about this. It's been a long time coming. And again, if you go to benavery.com/orbits, you'll be able to get on my mailing list, and it will send you a reminder when the book actually does come out on November 17th. But you can also go to Amazon right now, look up Parabolic Orbits. You might need to look up my name. I'm not sure. Some of my other books, you do have to look up the title and my name, because it doesn't always bring up the thing the first, because I'm not a big author. I'm not like, you know, a New York Times bestselling author who's going to pop up first time every time. But yeah, you can find it that way. You can pre-order it then for your Kindle if you're so inclined. And that actually helps us when it actually gets released, as far as like standings and things like that. But I'm not just here to talk about myself and talk about my project, although that's the primary thing I guess I am here to talk about. So yeah, Ghosts of the Future, that's me. But I do have 3 anthologies that I want to recommend to you. I have not read every story in all 3 of these anthologies, but they do kind of go along with what A Time for Everything and Parabolic Orbits are about. The first one I want to mention is Sky Songs, which is edited by Steve Stanton. There's a problem with this book, and that is that it's not exactly easy to get a hold of necessarily. Now, if you do contact Steve Stanton, I believe he was for a while, we're talking about a couple years ago now since I've been in contact with him, he was willing to send them out to people, but he sent me a ton of these. And the reason he sent me a ton of these is because he was... I contacted him and said, hey, can I get a couple of these? I'd like to purchase them and actually maybe give them away as some sort of giveaway or something like that. He sent me a bunch. So I've been trying to figure out, like, how do I get these out there? How do I, you know, and if you are interested in Sky Songs and you are interested in Parabolic Orbits or A Time for Everything, I will tell you this right now, that if you go to my website, benavery.com, and order Parabolic Orbits or A Time for Everything, I will send you a copy of Sky Songs for free as well. I have not read all the stories in here. As you see, my bookmark is about halfway in there, but everything I read so far has been just fun. I've enjoyed reading, and These are all faith-based stories. They are all stories that are science fiction and fantasy. There's some weird stuff in here. There's some funny stuff in here. There's some exciting stuff in here. They are stories of spirituality and speculative science, as it says on the cover here. And so this is a anthology that I recommend. And like I said, I might do a contest later on as well to get, so I'm probably going to hold a couple copies back. But if people do order Parabolic Orbits or A Time for Everything from me, I will throw in a copy of Sky Songs to, I think, like the first 10 or so people. So that is available to you if you are interested. Another book, and this is one that it was recommended to me, and I'm not exactly sure how it got recommended to me, but it came recommended on Amazon, and I just saw the title and thought, oh, that looks interesting. I'm going to get that. And I think it's because there is at least one person in this book who also appears in this book, and that is Parker J. Cole, who has been on the podcast before. It's called Beatitudes and Woes, and that's another reason why I would say this is of a kind when it comes to A Time for Everything and Parabolic Orbits. It is taking things that Jesus said and using those as the launch point, as the springboard to write a science fiction fantasy story. Now, this one I just got recently. I ordered it sight unseen and then realized that Parker J. Cole was in here. I was like, hey, that's great. The only story I've read in here is from Parker, okay? So when I say that I recommend this, I am going out on a limb a little bit. This looks like exactly the kind of thing that if you are interested in A Time for Everything, which takes all of the statements from Ephesians 3, a time to laugh, a time to cry, a time to kill, a time to spread, a time to plant, all those kind of things. Well, this does the same thing with the Beatitudes and the woes that Jesus said. The woe to you and blessed are you. Those statements that Jesus said from the Gospels. And then each one of those has a statement, has a story rather. And I was reading a review then from Amazon, and it said, this person who wrote the review said, it's kind of fun when you're reading the story to try and guess which one is it. And then after each story, it does reveal, because it says at the end, like the end of the Path of Mercy, the story ends, and then it says, blessed are they that are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And so you get to the end. I do not know. I did not check to see if it goes in order. I mean, that was one of the things that made A Time for Everything so easy when it came to being an editor and figuring out what order they're going to go in, because I just put them in the order of the scripture. And so I'm guessing they're in order. I don't know. And like I said, the only story I have read so far is Parker's. I'm excited to dig in more. I've been busy though. And so, yeah. So again, that's kind of a kind. It definitely feels like the kind of thing that would be comfortable on the shelf next to A Time for Everything and Parabolic Orbits. The final anthology that I want to recommend is this one, Flame Tree Planet. Now this one I don't have any kind of secret way that you can get, like Sky Songs. It's not really a secret way, but that's something I can make available in some ways. This is not, and this is the only copy I have, and it's the only copy I've ever seen. I have looked on eBay to see if it's on eBay every once in a while, and it is, but it's published by Concordia Press. It is from 1973. This is older than I am. I found this book at the Griffin Bookstore in South Bend, Indiana, which is the used bookstore and gaming shop that was the closest at the time to the college that I went to. And so Dwight Gordon, when I was a freshman, he was a sophomore, I think. I think he was the year ahead of me. And he's someone that I talked to a little bit because he liked science fiction. He was a big Star Trek fan. And early on, my freshman year, he said he was going to the Griffin. I'm like, what's that? That sounded interesting. And so we hopped on the bus together, rode from Mishawaka over to South Bend, went to the Griffin, this used bookstore, and I've gone there many, many times over the years since then. In fact, I just went 2 or 3 months ago again because it's still open. And still same basic setup. And same games upstairs, books downstairs, and this is where I found that book. It cost me $1.35. $1.35 back in the day. What happened though, as I was reading this, is I really did not know what it was until I pulled it off the shelf. It was edited by Roger Elwood. So Roger Elwood wrote the Angel Walk books, and he also wrote or edited rather, the Continuum anthology that I reviewed for Strangers and Aliens here on the YouTube feed. And he wrote a bunch of other Christian fiction. He's actually a writer that I've met and spent some time with, went to Red Lobster with him and got to hear his lobster joke about picking lobster. How many stores or how many places can you go where you actually choose what they're going to kill for you? And then when he told me that joke, I was like, that sounds familiar. And when I was rereading his book Angel Walk, the joke is in the book. It might have been in Fallen Angel, might have been in the second one, but that joke is one that he hung on to. But anyway, I did not know when I was talking to him. I only knew about the Christian fiction that he wrote when I was talking to him and spending time with him. I completely missed out on talking to him about the classic science fiction stuff that he worked on in the 70s. And this is one of them. And this is an anthology of religious science fantasy. And so when I pulled this off the shelf, I remember thinking, oh, that's interesting. And then remember opening the book, and there is in bold words, all caps, C.S. Lewis, Apostle to the Skeptics. And I thought, oh, and then I looked closer and realized what I was getting into. And so this is a book of short stories that I've hung on to ever since then. And we're talking about 1992, 1993 when I purchased this book. And so, I mean, it's been a couple decades. And this is something that inspired me. It inspired me so much that when I was starting to get into comics, I actually have written in here a phone number. It's an 800 number with the extension of 8000 and the name Leslie. That's the person I needed to talk to about potentially licensing one of these stories for being made into a comic book, which I never got very far with that. But that is something that I went ahead and like, I'm going to look into this, and I did. Bought it for $1.35, had it in my collection for years and years and years. It inspired me as a comic book person. It, in some ways, kind of inspired some of the comic book work that I did with some anthology stuff there. And in other ways, it just inspired me as a writer to write spiritual science fiction. And so those are 3 science fiction anthologies that I'm aware of and that I know I can say they're good. Now, does that mean there's not more? There are more. There's one that just came out called Lawless, and that one is taking stories of the judges based on the people that I know who are involved in that. That is a high level of quality in that project. There is also a series. Actually, I don't know how. It's clean fiction. I can say that. There is a series of 4 books called Seasons of Romantasy. And the reason I kind of bring that up is because that's going to be coming out, I think, the same week as Parabolic Orbits. There've already been 3 volumes. This is the 4th one because 4 seasons. And their original intention was, I think, was 1 volume, but they had so many people who sent in submissions that they decided to do 4 volumes, 1 for each season, instead of doing a gigantic thing like I did with The Time for Everything. And so I'm very excited about that because I do have a story in the winter one, which is the 4th one. Now, I will say this, my story is not necessarily a romantasy fantasy. It is a science fiction story, but I did make sure, because one of the things that they said when they were asking for their submissions was include castles and swords. And so there's a castle, there's some swords, but it's a science fiction story. And so how does it have a castle and swords? How does it bring in the actual high fantasy side of things? Well, you'll just have to get the book, as Mr. Fonger used to say when I was in kindergarten, 1st grade, and 2nd grade, when he would read to us half of a book. He was the librarian, and he was also going to be my 4th grade teacher, but I never got around to that because we moved to Michigan. But he would always read us half a book, and then he would say, and if you want to know what happens next, you have to, and then everyone would say with him, no, if you want to know what happens next, then everyone would say with him, you have to get the book. So my other memory about him is not so great. That was me standing in the middle of the recess yard, standing against the wall, I should say, not in the middle. The wall that we used to use for dodgeball. We would all stand in front of that wall. Upperclassmen, so 5th graders, 6th graders, would chuck the dodgeballs at us, 2nd and 3rd graders. And I think I pushed a kid. I'm not sure. I did something wrong along those lines, and I got in trouble. And what would happen when you would get in trouble? You would be stood against that wall, and it was like a firing squad. Mr. Fonger would stand there, and there would be a ring of people, or a half ring of people, who would stand there with him to laugh with him as he stands there and humiliates you. and says things like, "Oh, you think that that's what you have to do to blah 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 blah," and they would laugh, and that was rough. That was not good. So, my last thing I want to do is kind of talk about what the heart is behind parabolic orbits, and that is I'm going to do that by reading the introduction, which isn't too long, but is something that kind of gets into just the idea behind the parables and the idea behind the stories here, but also gets into some of the bigger things with science fiction. So this is my introduction to parabolic orbits, and it goes like this. There is a science fiction tradition of using stories as parables. Some of the most obvious examples are Star Trek and The Twilight Zone. Famously, there's Star Trek's Let This Be Your Last Battlefield, the one about absurd aliens, one black on the left side and white on the right side of his body, the other white on the left and black on the right, that highlights the absurdity of racism. I don't want to get into how Star Trek Section 31 completely obliterates the poignancy, absurd as it may be, of the end of this classic episode, because the less said about Section 31, the better. Although, coming out of the text here, you can listen to my review of Section 31 that, yeah, and I'm not going to say much more about Section 31 on this podcast. The monsters are due on Maple Street from The Twilight Zone is a cautionary tale about xenophobia, distrust, and mob mentality, nestled in a story about possible alien invasion. Science fiction has always been about big ideas, asking questions like what if, and why not, and what next, with imaginative explorations of space travel and time travel and technological innovations. But good sci-fi doesn't stop with the wild ideas. It also explores the human responses. In looking forward to the future, in looking upward to other planets, in looking outward at strange new life forms, good sci-fi also looks inward to the human heart. Whether you agree or disagree with what the writer says with their story, good science fiction engages, if you'll indulge me in a little hyperbole, mind, body, and soul. Mind, the intellect with interesting ideas. Body, the senses with exciting stories. Soul, the heart with emotional resonance. And in doing so, the good science fiction story will hopefully cause some thoughtful reflection. Which brings us to this collection. I'm not sure when I first became aware of the idea that when looking at the teachings of Jesus, we have a record of more stories than sermons. It might have been in a high school or college Bible class. It may have been in listening to my dad preach. It might have been from a book. But when I did become aware of this, it made sense to me. Stories are more memorable. I don't remember the 3 alliterative points made in a sermon last month, but I do remember a cute story about the pastor's toddler. So yes, the Sermon on the Mount has a lot of powerful teachings, but if we read Matthew 5 through 7, and someone says they'll give you a nice dinner at the restaurant of your choice if you can either list the Beatitudes or retell the story of the wise and foolish builders, most of you reading this would retell the story, not spout off the list. I know I would. I won't say everyone would do this. Some people have incredible memories, and that just might be how you're wired. But I feel like even if that's how you're wired, you'd be inclined to retell the story unless you're trying to show off with your list retention abilities or something. The stories of Jesus are called parables, and that's not a label added after the fact. The original writers used the Greek word parabola, a compound word formed by the roots para, near or close by, with, and bala, meaning to cast. So parable means to cast beside, and that's where I butchered the Greek, by the way. And so parable means to cast beside, and this is what Jesus does. On one side, we have truth, the truth about life, the universe, and everything. Or in more spiritualized terms, the truth about God, humanity, the kingdom of heaven, and you personally, and the relationship between all of them. And then, cast alongside that truth, you have Jesus' stories. Stories about daily life, sometimes mundane and sometimes exaggerated, but always relatable to his audience. Stories that reflect and explain facets of the truth. Stories that put in relatable terms, especially to the audience of the time, the relationship between God, humanity, the kingdom of heaven, and you personally. Or life, the universe, and everything, if you prefer. The goal of this collection is to explore Jesus' parables by casting our own interpretations, illuminations, and meditations alongside them. These stories aren't devotionals, nor are they substitutes for Jesus' original teachings. They are reimaginings and retellings of his parables through the lenses of science fiction and fantasy, where ancient metaphors take on new form among spaceships, aliens, and robots. The hope is to present a story that entertains but also encourages engagement with Jesus' teachings, to cause some thoughtful reflection on Jesus' words, and to spark a fresh encounter with the timeless truths through the fantastic and the futuristic. In doing so, we hope these stories raise questions. Written by some of the most talented writers I've ever interacted with, these tales ask the usual sci-fi questions. What if? Why not? What next? But beneath the speculative surface, they also prompt deeper spiritual inquiry. Questions rooted in Jesus' parables, starting with who? Who am I in this parable? Who is God? Who is my neighbor? And then what? What role do I play? What did this mean to those who first heard it? What might it mean to me now? I hope that between these covers you will discover some new writers that you enjoy, and that you will check them out, follow them, and pick up their work. I hope that the stories will entertain you. Each story can be read just for entertainment value, if that's your preference. And after each story, you will find the original parable, or rather an English translation of the original version, the specific translation chosen by the author of the story preceding it. Because I hope you, whatever your religious inclinations may be, will accept our invitation to think about, pray about, and grapple with Jesus' teachings. Ultimately, I just hope you have a fun time reading and thinking about life, the universe, and everything. Because I know that I had a fun time reading and thinking about life, the universe, and everything while I was editing the stories in this book. Ben Avery, Napanee, Indiana, October 2025. So, there. All right. That is Parabolic Orbits. That is me unboxing it, seeing it for the first time in paper. And I was looking at the back cover as I was reading it and just thinking, I know in the proof PDF that they did, this is not the size and placement of the barcode. And so I'm going to take a look at that again. I don't think I'm going to adjust this. Yeah. We'll see. We'll see. But thank you for spending time with me. And please, again, benavery.com/orbits. I know I've been talking about it in a lot of the episodes lately, and I've been trying to keep the actual amount of time that I've talked about it to a minimum, but I did want to, now that it's finally in my hands, we are a week away from release, and like I said, you can go ahead and go to Amazon and pre-order the Kindle version. You can order this on the 17th, and I'm going to make a spot on my personal website where you can order it directly from me after I get my copies from Amazon. So yeah, all that said, thank you for, if you've made it this long, thank you for spending your time with me. And hopefully, this has still given you some food for thought, given you some recommendations, and caused you to think about Jesus' parables a little bit. And that is one thing I would say before I close down, is just when you are reading Jesus' parables, what is interesting to me, and this is the Bible in general, is to ask yourself, okay, so what did it mean to the people who are reading it in the time? And what does it mean now to me? And when it comes to the parables, it also is a chance for you to say, okay, so how do I fit into this parable? And just taking a look at the Good Samaritan, which is the parable that I took on for this first volume with my story. When you're looking at the Good Samaritan, I recommend, and this is all the parables, but for Good Samaritan specific, I would say, okay, so how do I fit in if I am the man who was robbed? How do I fit in if I am the Samaritan? What does that mean? What should my life look like? And then ask yourself, okay, so what about the way my life actually looks? Is it closer to the Levite? Is it closer to the priest? How do I fit in? When Jesus is telling this story, who am I in this story? And the same thing with the seeds. When Jesus is talking about the seeds that got scattered, which one am I? That's what you're invited to ask yourself. That's what Jesus was inviting them to ask themselves. When he finished telling the story of the Good Samaritan, he said straight out, hey, so which one was the one who was a good neighbor? And then he says, go and do the same. He's saying this is the one you should be. But then the implied question is, but which one are you really? And so that's what Jesus was doing. He was telling these stories to get people thinking. And he definitely, in some ways was hiding messages that they weren't ready for and that were going to be revealed later on. And, there's a lot of nuance and layers to what he was doing with his parables. But the whole idea behind this book is to get you thinking about the parables in just a slightly different way, to see it from a different perspective. One of the things as the editor that I told people is I don't want you to twist the parable on its head so that, to get people thinking about it because you're thinking about the negative version of it. Now, some of the stories do have negative outcomes, but that's because the parables did. I wanted it to be a retelling of the story that actually is retelling the story beat for beat. Now, there's definitely artistic license that went into it, but I wanted it to be recognizable. And then the other thing is, yes, just like Beatitudes and Woes, actually, when you get to the end of the story, it then has the text of the story that Jesus told. So, yeah. So anyway, there's a little bit of not just encouragement, but also hopefully maybe maybe it is encouragement. I'm encouraging you, stick your nose in your Bible and start asking those questions. And, yeah. So until next time. Thanks for spending time with me. Please hit like. Please hit subscribe. We are creeping up on 500 subscribers. I don't know. Maybe that's a way that I can try and give away some more of those books as well. For now, I'm going to enjoy my rock and rye ritual, which comes from when I would finish camps. We would, up in Michigan, I would buy rock and rye because that was really the only place I could find it. And then, the last day of camp, I would just celebrate the end of camp with a rock and rye. And it turned into where I would also celebrate a project like this getting completed, and it's about as complete as you can get. I mean, it is ready to go. And so I figured now is the time to crack open that. Now it's a diet rock and rye because I got to watch the sugars, but yeah. So until next time, please hit like, please hit subscribe. Thank you for spending time with me, and Godspeed.